Introduction to Algebra and its Applications. Have you ever wondered how equations, symbols, and rules help solve real-world problems? Whether it's calculating profits, budgeting, or understanding economic trends, algebra is everywhere. From managing personal finances to analyzing market data, algebra plays a crucial role in making informed decisions. So let's look into its building blocks and unlock its potential. Algebra isn't just about abstract symbols. It's a powerful tool that allows us to model real-world scenarios, make predictions, and find solutions. All right, let's begin by looking at what algebra really is. Algebra is the language of mathematics, where we use symbols like x, y, and z to represent numbers or values we don't yet know. These variables allow us to work with relationships and equations that can describe the world around us. In this session, we'll explore how algebra is used to simplify complex problems and how its rules and operations help us make sense of everything from simple calculations to more complex economic models. What is algebra? Here's an equation. The value of y is equal to 6 times x plus 4 times z minus 3. Simple, right? But what does it actually mean? Let's break it down. First, x and z are variables. These are symbols representing numbers that can change. The value of x and z can vary depending on the situation. For example, x could represent the number of hours you work, and z might represent your bonus. Then we have 6, 4, and minus 3. These are constants, which are values that remain fixed. These numbers don't change and help define the relationship between the variables. Together, these elements form terms like 6x, 4z, and minus 3, which are then connected by plus and minus. These symbols help us combine different pieces of information to express more complex relationships. Now, imagine x is the number of hours you work, z is your bonus, and y is your total earnings. This equation shows how your total earnings depend on the number of hours you work and your bonus. See how algebra connects directly to our daily lives? Let's move to symbols and rules behind algebra to better understand how we can use these tools to solve real-world problems. Symbols and rules. Algebra isn't just about numbers. It's about the rules that bind them. These rules help us understand how numbers interact with each other. Let's start by looking at these binary operators: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Notice something interesting? For addition and multiplication, the order doesn't matter. For example, 3 times 4 is the same as 4 times 3. The result will still be 12. This property is called commutativity. But what happens with subtraction? Try 4 minus and 3 minus 4. You'll notice different results, right? That's because subtraction is not commutative. Here, the order does matter. Here's a real-world example. Imagine you have 40 pounds and spend 30 pounds. You're left with 10 pounds. But if you spend 40 pounds and only have 30 pounds, you're now in debt. This highlights how important understanding the rules of operations is, especially when we're dealing with real-world situations like budgeting or managing expenses. All right, now let's move on to variables and constants. These are the real powerhouses of algebra. They allow us to create relationships, make predictions, and solve problems. Let's dive into how they work next. Variables and constants. Have you ever used a placeholder for something unknown? That's exactly what variables do. A letter like x in the expression x plus 4 is simply saying, insert a number here. It's like a stand-in for a value we don't yet know. Variables like x, y, or z change depending on the context or situation. For example, in the equation x plus 4, the value of x could be any number. It's flexible and can represent different quantities. On the other hand, we have constants, numbers that don't change. A great example is pi, which equals approximately 3.14. Pi is a constant, meaning its value is always the same no matter the context. Here's a simple example from economics. We use the equation y is equal to 2 times I, where I represents investment and y represents income. This means that if investment increases, income doubles. It's that straightforward. If we know I, we can easily calculate y. Now that we understand variables and constants, let's move on to how algebra simplifies operations, starting with how it removes the multiplication sign to make calculations easier. Let's dive into that next.